The Ayua? Yeah.
When Jane went
Which
into
is, by the way, a
India,
legitimate Indo-European root word. Okay, go
I was
ahead.
just wondering where that came from.
Indo-European root word.
Okay.
It's a reconstruction because nobody
Well,
can find
the concept,
Indo-European.
I mean, the
Yeah.
concept of where that came
Well, you know
from.
where the concept came from. Come on, I'm in Utah Valley. Yeah, I mean, seriously, you know where the concept came from. You know what I'm doing. I get to play games like that, you know. Yeah.
Nothing about any of the series, but my favorite book is Past Watch. I know that doesn't get a lot of attention, but that is by far my favorite.
Well, I am so glad that you like that one. That's my answer to all of the idiots who in 1992 were criticizing Columbus for daring to not be a modern, politically correct person. There aren't many individuals who truly changed the world, and most of them are the scum of the earth. You know, Napoleon, Alexander, Hitler, they changed the world. Well, Columbus changed the world, and he did not do it in order to conquer it. He actually had some good ideas in mind, an obsessive guy, and so I played with his actual history. It really is true. There was no sign that he had any interest in sailing west until that shipwreck. And when he came up on the beach in Portugal, from that moment on, he was obsessed with sailing west in order to try to convert China to Christianity. It was his answer to the fall of Constantinople. And so, you know, I played with that and I had a lot of fun. How do you discover America without destroying it? How do you go back and fix stuff in time? The trouble is, here's a weakness in the book. They have a plan, they carry out the plan, and it works. But if you know history, then it's just lots of fun to watch it grow, isn't it? So I just had a great time writing it. The problem is there were supposed to be 2 sequels, but they were even under contract. But I had to buy the contracts back because I ran into a fatal problem. The first Past Watch novel changes the past, so the next 2 can't. Because the rules of time travel that I'm using make it so once you've changed it, it's changed. And the future that it originated in is gone. And so the other 2 were going to be just finding out what really happened. And one of them is Noah and his flood, and the other one is Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And I always joked back when they were still under contract that the Adam and Eve one was the one that was going to basically end my career. And so I was going to have it be published last or posthumously, but instead I'm going to be working it into another project. It's going to come up, but I bought those contracts back, and those books are not going to exist. The second book, the Flood one, actually does exist as a story called Atlantis that was in a program book. And I'm probably going to expand it and bring it out as a novella. There's some things I need to fix. I misremembered some of the Gilgamesh epic, and so some of the names are wrong, and little things like that. But it's fun as a novella, as a full standalone novel. No, it'd just be frustrating. So, but thank you for calling attention to Past Watch. I'm really proud of that book.
Thank you.
It's a great.
Yeah.
Any chance we'll ever see the rest of the Lovelock series?
Yeah, there is a very good chance. And the truth is, you got to realize the original outline did not have a monkey in it. We changed the title because we fell in love with the monkey. But now we have this cat Rasputin that is the heart of the second novel, and it's him. Eventually, I mean, the second novel ends with Rasputin essentially catching Lovelock and having him trapped and being prepared to kill him. And we know Rasputin is not afraid to kill. But then they work out a deal and decide to take over the world. So now you know it. Don't have to worry about it. And then the third book is they take over the world. So once again, they have a plan. But this one's going to be a little more complicated. It's the fear of humans that there'll come along an animal that's smarter than us at our own game. And we
like
may
keeping the brain on steroids.
Well, yes, that's right. But I'm glad that you're at least looking for that. And I want you to know that no matter how irritated any of you are that this series has not been finished, Kathy Kidd is even more irritated because it's entirely my fault. Yeah.
Are you going to work with Marvel?
No, we finished the contracts, and they were happy with the results, but the sales didn't take off and set the world on fire. And so I'm thrilled with the work they did. They kept their word. They did a beautiful job of doing comic adaptations of my work. And
the adaptations
well, I had fun with Iron Man, but what happened was that it was as much work for each Iron Man book as if I had written the book. Only I get paid about $120, and because there's not that much money in comic books. Comic book scripters, the best of them, they are working constantly in order just to make a good book. There's not a lot of money in it. there's plenty of money for Marvel, but they're making a lot more money from their movies now than they are from their comic books. So, you know, and the comic books are a wonderful art form, but if you're a career writer, you really can't afford to spend that much time dabbling in comic books. There are other people who know comic books better. I mean, they made Iron Man look better than it deserved. My characters tend to get taught like me. So, yes.
For the Richmond movie, if they already have it filmed, then why do they wait an entire year to put it out?
They're doing CGI. They're doing the graphics. They're erasing all those little hubs. They're coming up with all kinds of other stuff. So much of this is a blue screen, green screen, whatever color they're using, movie, that it takes a year. Basically, they make the live action scenes, and then they make the animated film around it. But there are sets that don't exist anywhere.
Have you seen Sluggers?
You know, I've seen drawings, but I haven't seen any animation of them, so I have no idea what they end up looking like. I don't think there are ever any puppet performance, so it's all CGI for them.
You never know if they're going to throw out a trailer?
You'll find out probably a day or two before me, and then you guys will send me emails telling me, oh, look. That's when I'll find out. That's the way I find out everything about the movie. Is people find out online, and then they tell me. And so I figured that my readers are my information net, and you guys inform me of all this stuff. Okay, you're hiding back there. Yeah.
On a complete non-book related note, did you ever get your invite to Movie Pass?
My what? No.
I've got a membership if you'd like one.
Well, please inform me. I want to try it out in Greensboro and see if I like it. But I would love to have my invite because no, you can write in a thing like that and they don't care. You still don't get the invite from the company.
Well, I live in Boise, and my husband said, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea." Put his name on a waiting list, and within a week, he had a membership.
Well, I never thought of that. Because I have friends who are on waiting lists to get into America as immigrants. They have 20 years to wait. And
He and I are the only members in Boise. So.
Oh, okay. Well, in Greensboro, there are probably 8 more, and so that's probably our quota. How many people here have the Movie Pass membership? Anybody? Okay, see, it's just you. You're the only one, and you're from Boise. Yeah, what?
Just want to let you know that Lost Boys made me cry at the end.
Okay.
Oh.
Did you ever feel like Sixth Sense was kind of a...
Did I ever feel like Sixth Sense was based on Lost Boys? Oh, of course it is. I mean, Shyamalan is known for taking books, changing enough stuff that he won't get sued, and then making them without paying for them or crediting them in any way. So he reads a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. Lost Boys is exactly what Hollywood Film School graduates who actually believed the crap they were told would do with it. You can't have it be the kid. So who's the person who's dead? Well, let's make it the shrink. I had the shrink in Lost Boys, but they just changed who was the one who was actually dead and didn't know it. That's all. And otherwise, it's pretty much Lost Boys. I never had the line, I see dead people. Don't. That's because the kid could never say it in my book, because nobody knew it until too late. Yeah.
So was it, you said it was, or I heard it was like a collection of short stories first?
It was a short story. It was a single short story first. And the short story was first person, which is the only way to tell ghost stories. Guys, if you're telling a ghost story, saying, so this guy and this girl are in the house, that's nothing. This is how you tell a ghost story. This is how I told it the first time when I was improvising it at a Halloween party at Appalachian State University back in the early 80s. Well, I don't even know if I should tell this one because it's kind of personal. Okay. Back when we first moved to Greensboro. That's how you start. That's how it's done. And so I wrote that ghost story in first person for that. But the problem is, it would never work in novel. So I still based it on my family, which my wife hates it when I say that because, of course, that means that Deanne is based on her. But I want you to know that book marks the only time that I have ever allowed any other person to have a vote on what one of my characters would do. Because Christine had the right to say, Deanne would not do that. And I said, hey, come on, it's not really you, it's a fictionalized version of you, and I need her to do this. And Deanne would not do that, and I get to say she would not do that. I had to say that was right, that was fair, because she was going to have to live with the consequences of what people thought. So there are a few things that Deanne does differently than I would have had her do. And I will never do autobiographical fiction again. I mean, with Ender's Game, I raided my own family, but you know, I changed so much. There's not, but with Lost Boys, I was sitting there at the end of the book, imagining the death of my oldest son, and what it would be like. And you know, when I'm writing, I'm not emotionally involved. I'm in the trance of writing. I'm focused in on holding all the things in my mind. There's no way I can be emotionally involved in the scene because I'm emotionally involved in the task. Completely different thing. By the way, writers, if you're emotionally moved by your own story, stop. Wait until you're cooled down, because what you're doing is you're not creating your emotional experience, you're not venting. You're creating a script that readers will use to create the emotional experience for themselves. Well, I was still doing that, but, you know, I never want to do that writing through tears thing again. It was just too hard, too hard. After writing it, then I did lose 2 children, and I'll tell you, I did get it right. I will never go there again, never. It's too much.
It's a powerful story.
Well, the thing is, to read Lost Boys, my novel Lost Boys, you have to give to the story so much emotionally that a lot of readers just can't do it. It's just too demanding. And so it repels them. And so there are people who really hate it because it's too emotional, it's trying too hard, you know, but then there are readers who, thank you, are willing to accept the book and accept it the way that it's supposed to be. So thank you for liking it. But Lost Boys is a minority taste. So, anybody else? I want to make sure we, you know, there looks like enough people here. The signing may take a while. So, anybody else have any questions? Yes.
How much research goes into your novels?
How much research? My life is research. Every now and then, for a particular project, there's stuff I have to look up. For my Middle Ages series, because I'm having all of the Indo-European gods living in America, I have to look up those gods. And then I suddenly realized that it's not just Indo-Europeans. I had to go into the Egyptians, and I found out that Thoth was exactly what I needed him to be. He is Hermes and Loki. He is the healer and the messenger, and so, you know, so I was able to work the Egyptians in and turn in-self and out-self into Ka and Ba. So the research on that was lots of fun. I almost never do research. What I do is I'm always reading history, science, whatever, and whatever I happen to be reading at that moment starts popping up in the fiction. And you know, so that I read a Scientific American article about Amaranth right when I was writing Speaker for the Dead. Amaranth is in Speaker for the Dead. There's no deep significance in it. It's just the article I happened to read, thought way cool, and stuck it in. And so, you know, when I said earlier that I tell my writing students you have to know everything about everything, I mean that, and that's my lifelong project, to just keep learning as much as I possibly can. But it also makes me impatient with people who make pronouncements on subjects that they have not sufficiently researched. That bothers me. And people who presume to speak for science when they don't think like a scientist. You know, because a scientist never makes pronouncements about, you know, final pronouncements. No science is final. And as soon as somebody says, this is it, and you go, you're not a scientist now. Because at that moment, they've started becoming dogmatic. They're the guys who would have burned Galileo if he had recanted. They're no longer the guys who would have been Galileo. You know what I'm saying? They want to wrap themselves in the mantle of Galileo, but they're not worthy of it. We have a lot of bad science today. And you also, here's another one that you know that you're not hearing a scientist. We are within 10 years of. That is crap by definition. It is obvious stupidity, but you hear it all the time. We are within 10 years of a really legitimate AI. Well, that was 20 years ago, and we're no closer now than we were then. We are within 10 years of having effective language translation by computer. No, we're farther now than we were then because we're no longer satisfied with the idiotic solutions we had. We can't even make a grammar checker, okay? If you run a grammar checker on a perfectly grammatical passage and make all the changes it tells you to make, then run it through again and make all the new changes it tells you to make until finally it stops telling you to make changes, it'll sound like a Korean immigrant. because the human brain can handle speech in a way that computers can't. Because the language is in continuous flux, and the computer cannot respond. No matter what they do with it, it's all just about what the programmer did. It's all like video games. It's not programming the computer, it's really just programming you. And so, you know, that kind of thing, if the more you learn, the more impatient you get. The more impatient I get with journalism, the more impatient I get with historians who have to stick in their little political things, and they go, come on, You know, I've known since I was 10 and I read Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which I'm listening to again now for the first time in 50 years. So, and it holds up. And now I realize where I got a lot of my snobby attitudes about history was I was listening to I was reading William L. Shirer, and he shows his sources, evaluates them in front of us, says, this comes from this guy's journal. It was not admitted to evidence of the Nuremberg trials, but that's because it implicates Soviet figures, and there was a Soviet judge on the panel. So they cut out any evidence that would embarrass the Russians, but it's still a perfectly valid source. And when you hear a little thing like that in the middle of a history of the rise of the Third Reich, you start getting that attitude toward all the history you read from then on. So that was my training as a 10-year-old. It just polluted me for life. But if you're not reading stuff skeptically, if you actually read the news and think you're being told the truth, what a victim you are. Anyway, was that what I wanted to do with your time? Okay. There's a hand. See, it's his fault now if I talk more. Yeah.
Where do you go for inspiration besides reading historical works and other sci-fi?
I don't have to go anywhere for inspiration. Inspiration, ideas are so cheap and so easy. In my writing classes, I show people how to just take anything and generate ideas out of it. If you want to write a story, I can take his black jacket, I can take his Superman t-shirt, I can take the weather, a crack in the sidewalk, the non-parking place I'm parked in with my hope that I won't get towed, etc. You can make a story out of any of them. All you have to do is say, now why is it that way? What does that jacket mean to him? And why is he still wearing it indoors when it's as warm as it is right now? And we start speculating on all of it, and I can come up with all kinds of meanings for that jacket. And then I start coming with a character, with relationships I give with somebody else in his life. You just turn anything into a story. It's easy to do. Ideas are cheap. Knowing what to do with them, that's hard. And so that's where I struggle. I don't struggle for inspiration. I have so many ideas stacked up, I don't have to have another one as long as I live. But I still have it. But what's hard is finding the way everything meshes together. So my rule is, I'm not really ready to write a story until I've brought two stories that have a completely separate genesis together and made them fit. And once I'm doing that, then the tension between them, making them work together, is what brings it to life. I mean, that's what I'm doing with my Myth Mages series, The Lost Gate and Gate Thief, which I just finished last Saturday, is that I'm taking the idea that I've worked on for 30 plus years, almost 40 years, of this world, the Myth Mages world with that magic system. But it was only in the last 5 years that I realized I needed to put it together with the gods and witches and demons and everything in this world. The only thing I don't include is vampires, because I hate vampires. I just find them to be the stupidest idea that ever existed. The only one that competes with them is werewolves. So I just, and it's nothing to do with any recent vampire books. I hated them before those were written, okay? I just am so not interested. As soon as you say vampire, I go, oh, so that's for other people.
Even the glowing ones, huh?
You say what?
Even the glowing ones.
The glowing ones?
Yeah.
What do we have glowing?
Glittery.
Oh, I didn't know about sparkling. Glitter? Or I have no idea. Anyway, I have no idea what you're referring to, but...
They sparkle in Twilight.
Oh, do they? But only in the movie. Do they sparkle in the
Yeah.
In the book.
In the
That
book?
was the inspiration for the whole series.
Well, like I know that. Okay. Anyway, you know, she's a good writer, but it's hard for me to care about a story where I just don't buy the premise. As Johnny Carson said, buy the premise, buy the bit. Don't buy the premise, you don't buy the bit. Yeah.
Who's your favorite science fiction?
My favorite science fiction living,
Doesn't matter.
because you know most of my favorites are dead, but there are some terrific ones right now. Living writer who's doing what I think is the most exciting work is Christine Catherine Rush. Her Retrieval Artist series is just brilliant. It's a world that just keeps growing. Nice adventurous stories. The premise is very good. It deals with legalistic issues with alien races that have very strange cultures, and we have treaties with them that mean that their laws apply to humans who accidentally cross them. And if you think doing a cartoon about Muhammad is bad, you should see what goes on in these books. But brilliant, brilliant work. She's a wonderful writer too. So I think I'd have to say she's my favorite right now. But you got to realize science fiction is essentially dead. Most people are not doing their best work in science fiction. Most of the science fiction writers have moved over to fantasy and are writing fantasy with the aesthetic of science fiction. That is, they justify the fantasy universe as thoroughly as they used to justify science fiction universes. That's why you can read Game of Thrones and all of the books and barely be aware that there's any magic, and you go, oh, I guess that part is magic, and there are dragons, I guess that's magic, and yeah, she did come out of the flame, but it's all treated like science fiction, so that you aren't even really that aware of it as, you know, you don't have wizards going, zap, zap, you know, it's not a D&D game. It's written like science fiction. So, you know, George Martin was one of the great science fiction writers. Now he's one of the great fantasy writers. So that's where the writing has gone. I'm even doing it, you know, Lost Gate. Pathfinder is fantasy and science fiction dress, just as Lost Gate is science fiction and fantasy dress. It's the same stuff. I learned early on in my career that the difference between science fiction and fantasy, I turned in some of my first stories to Analog Magazine. And Ben Bober wrote back and said about my Worthing stories, he said, we publish science fiction and what you sent us is fantasy. Well, it wasn't, it was science fiction. They arrived on this world in a spaceship, and I didn't show that in the story. It was just in the woods and people with special abilities. So I realized fantasy has trees, science fiction has rivets. That's the difference. Look at the covers of the books, you'll see that I'm right. Sheet metal and rivets, or you know, lots of smooth plastic in science fiction, but lots of trees in fantasy. We're at a time where we probably should wrap up, but I have a question from a short person, and I like to, you know, for one thing, you have the courage to wear a Pikachu t-shirt. That's good, that's good. We all remember.
How long did it take you to write Ender's Game?
Ender's Game is a special case because in my mind, I was just writing it to set up Speaker for the Dead. Speaker for the Dead was the real novel. And Ender's Game was just expanding a short story. So I spent a week, that's the first few short chapters, and then I had enough new characters that I had to rethink everything. So I took about a week off. I actually came here to Utah and signed copies of Saints. That was what happened during that week, because that's when Saints came out. Then I went back home, and in 3 weeks I finished the book. Because I type really fast, and I write as if I were speaking it to people, as if I had an audience and I was improvising it to the audience. That's why it's very oral. My stuff is meant to be read aloud. I don't follow the rules of punctuation that your teachers taught you back when they used to teach rules of punctuation. I punctuate for you to be able to follow, put the pauses where they're supposed to be, put the emphasis where it's supposed to be. It's a guide to be read aloud. My stuff is supposed to be read aloud. Ender's Game was very smooth because I knew the story. Other books of mine, like Gate Thief, which I just wrote, it was due in May. I turned it in last Saturday. That tells you something. It was just really hard to write that one, and I had to think it through. I had to keep reinventing it. With every new thing I thought of, it changed everything. So, you know, the thinking time is long. The typing time, it's a breeze. That's easy. And with that, why don't we plan to do the signing? I understand you guys, did you get numbers along with you? So